planter friend, it's Min. How are you going? Today let's talk about the most unkillable plant, which is this one here. It's called a ZZ plant, otherwise known as Zamioculcas Zamifolia. It belongs in the Raceae family and native to Africa, and it's a very drought tolerant and set and forget plant. It comes in different varieties. It does flower, but the flowers are not spectacular. People tend to buy it for more their gorgeous glossy green leaves or dark leaves, and also the structural beauty of the stems as well. I have a few different varieties of this plant. So I have a Zanibar Gem, I also have a Zenzii, and also a Jungle Warrior. And the Jungle Warrior, the actual immature leaves or immature stems, the young stems start off with green and then it darkens off to a darker color. So makes a wonderful, gorgeous looking plant. And let's start. So let's talk about watering. So watering is very important to not overwater this plant, because really the only way to kill this plant is by overwatering it. So just making sure that the water is completely dry, like 100% dry before watering. Use your finger, feel the soil, is the soil moist? If you're not sure, give it another week and then check it again, because this plant is very drought tolerant. It can tolerate for another week. It will be fine. And when watering, I just use normal tap water. It doesn't need any special water. Tap water is fine. Water the soil completely, making sure the water drains out of the drainage hole, and definitely get rid of any excess water. Definitely don't want this plant sitting in water, because that can definitely rot its roots. This plant contains, well, it has a lot of water in its stems. It also has a root system where it has these bulbs, and the bulbs actually contain a lot of water and nutrients in it. And if this plant is overwatered, the bulbs can actually rot, the stems can become mushy, the leaves can become yellow and drop, and you end up with a mushy dead plant. So watering is really the only way to kill this plant. I tend to water my Zenzii or ZZ plant once a month. Maybe in summer, actually in summer I really don't go more than once a month either. Just every single time I really make sure the soil is completely dry. So I think it depends on really where you put your ZZ plant and what your household temperature is. But in general, it's better to underwater this plant than overwater it. And when it comes to fertilizing, this ZZ plant doesn't need a lot of fertilizer, so it makes a great set and forget plant. I tend to fertilize my ZZ once every 6 months with a half reduced concentration of liquid fertilizer called We the Wild. If you don't have that product, just any well-balanced liquid fertilizer is fine, but just trying to make sure that the concentration is diluted to 50%, because definitely don't want to burn the roots on this plant. When it comes to the soil and repotting, I generally leave my ZZ plant to be completely root bound. They don't like to be in a pot that's too big, because what can happen if it's sitting in a pot that's too big, it can end up being overwatered because the soil doesn't the moisture in the soil doesn't evaporate as quickly, and that can lead to root rot. So repotting it only when the the pot is completely root bound, and also going just to one size bigger. So definitely not two sizes, just one size bigger is enough for this plant. The soil mixture I use is a very well draining soil mixture. There's all different soil mixtures you can do. I tend to use 70% premium potting mix and 30% perlite. You can change the perlite to something like cacti soil or pumice. That will help to make the soil more well draining, but still contain a little bit of moisture. And when it comes to the actual pot that I use, often I will repot my ZZ plant in a plastic pot, but you can, if you're really in overwater, maybe try a terracotta pot, because the actual moisture in the soil will evaporate more quickly in a terracotta pot or unglazed ceramic pot. When it comes to humidity, no issue with this plant. When it comes to humidity, it's fine. I put my household, well, there's different humidity in different areas of my household, it can range from between 40% to 70%. And I found that it doesn't really matter with this plant. It can tolerate a whole range of humidity. I suspect that this plant will go faster if it's in a higher humidity, but it's not really fussy, so I wouldn't worry really about humidity. When it comes to things like pests, these are very pest resistant plants, and I think that's because of the thicker kind of leaves. Pests don't really like it. I've only had one issue once with aphids, and that's because my household tends to be prone to aphids. And I just sprayed it with neem oil, like a solution consisting of 1 litre of water, 5 mils of neem oil, 5 mils of dishwashing solution, and I shake it all off and I sprayed it a few times, and then the aphids went away. So they're pretty much pest tolerant plants. And let's talk about temperature. When it comes to temperature, once again, no issue with this plant. It likes a whole range of temperatures. Even though it comes from Africa where it's very hot, my household temperature ranges from 55 Fahrenheit to up to about 80 Fahrenheit or 85 Fahrenheit. So that's roughly around about 12 degrees Celsius to around about 30 degrees Celsius. And I haven't had any issues with this plant at all. When it comes to lighting, now lighting is important because this plant can burn very easily if it's in direct sunlight. I also found that even if it receives morning direct sunlight, it can still burn. And so I place this plant in the area that's away from direct sunlight. It only receives indirect sunlight. It's actually advertised as a low light tolerant plant, which it is. This is one of the plants where it can survive, well, I wouldn't say complete darkness, but very low light. And it just won't grow as quickly if it's in a low light situation. It'll grow a lot faster if it's in a higher light situation, but it can tolerate the low light. And I have my ZZ plant in 2 areas of my household. One in the lower light situation. It's pretty much 6 meters away from an east facing window, and it's about 1 meter away from a north facing doorway, and it only has a little bit of light, and it's actually fine. The other plant, which is in, well, about 5 meters away, I should say, from a south facing window, and that receives indirect light all day long. And I do find that ZZ plant actually grows a lot faster compared to the ones that I have in the lower light situation. When it comes to propagation, this plant is super easy to propagate. This is actually a propagation I started about 3 months ago. You can see it's actually forming roots. All I did was cut one of the stems off, popped it in water, changed the water every week, placed in an area that receives a lot of bright indirect sunlight, and I'm just waiting for the roots to grow. I'll make a video later on how to propagate this plant in 4 different ways, and once that's done, I'll pop a link down below and also a link above as well. And this plant here is a toxic plant, so definitely keep it away from dogs, cats, babies, little kids that are very curious, that will put anything in their mouths. It's a toxic plant. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen if an animal or a child actually eats the leaves, but better to not try and avoid those situations. So definitely pop in an area where animals and kids can't reach is a good idea. So that's all the care tips I have for this gorgeous plant, ZZ plant. If you have any care tips of your own, pop your comments down below. If you have any questions for me, I'd love to reply to you. And if you did like this kind of content, hit the likes button, subscribe to the channel, and if you did like this video, maybe watch the next video as well. See ya, bye.